bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo, also known as Ricky France, and a great episode for you today. Dr. Northrup, she is a best-selling author. She's been on Dr.Oz, Oprah, like 9-10 times. She's been on Rachel Ray. She has 3 best-selling books. She has an amazing resume. A certified physician. She is a professor in Vermont. Like I said, amazing resume. I won't go through it all now because it would take up the whole intro. But she's on today to discuss all the agendas that are being pushed, all the things that are going on. And we had a awesome discussion. I'll put links to all her social media accounts in the show description, so please check that out. Also, if you want to support my show, we're doing the value for value system. So if you get some value out of this conversation, try to give some value back. We do have a Patreon page, and if you support me on Patreon, I let you know who's going to be on the show, who I'm booking, collaborations I'm doing, all that type of stuff. And then I also have a PayPal account if you want to tip the show. And how else? Oh, and I have a merch store if you want to buy some merch and support the show that way. So plenty of ways of supporting the show, but obviously the future's uncertain. There's a lot of craziness going on in the world. My wife's a waitress. We know how hard it is to feel comfortable spending money right now. Restaurants are closing. In Massachusetts, where I live, they added a curfew, which makes it even harder for restaurants to stay open and survive. Business has been tough for so many of us. So if you can't support the show financially, rate the show, review the show, share the show. All that stuff helps. And now it's even easier to share the show because thanks to Content Safe, which I just had Matt on the last Union of the Unwanted, and he's the guy from Content Safe. Now my show is found on Float, BitChute, Odyssey. Is that all of them? I think that's all of them. So it's available on these awesome alternatives. You can go on Float. I have a personal page now, and I have a Ripple Effect podcast page. BitChute has just about all my shows on there, and Odyssey, they're being uploaded. So right now we're in the process of uploading the whole archives, Ripple Effect archives, to these other platforms. Hopefully very soon they'll all be there, but by the time you listen to this, maybe they're all available already. And I'm super excited to be on these platforms. I've been using them more since I've had representatives on the last Union of the Unwanted. We had Aaron from Float, we had Jeremy from Odyssey and Library, and then we had Matt from Content Safe. And since I've been using these platforms since they've been on the show, I love them. I mean, you can actually use them to search interesting research, interesting documentaries, all the stuff we used to do on Google and YouTube that you can't do anymore. Now you can do on Float, you can do on Odyssey and Library, BitChute. You can actually find interesting stuff. So please check out those platforms, support those platforms, because if you heard the last Union of the Unwanted, they really care about free speech, and they're fighting for the same things we're fighting for. So definitely support them, and you'll be surprised how awesome they are. They're very similar to the social media platforms and video platforms we use now in regards to easy to use and easy to find things and all the features we like, but they're better because there's no censorship, and you can actually find interesting researchers and people and channels. So definitely do that. Other announcements, and I'm excited because there's tons of announcements. So now the Ripple Effect Podcast is on all these alternative platforms, and also the Union of Unwanted, and Sam Tripoli kind of announced it on his Whitney Webb episode and his episode with Charlie Robinson recently on Tinfoil Hat Podcast. But it's become its own show. We've decided to make it its own show. It's growing. It's getting all the support. Everybody who listens, everybody who participates, all the hosts, we're all a part of this unwanted community, and I'm so excited about growing it. Soon enough, iTunes and Spotify and all the other places, all the apps that you use, you'll be able to find our own RSS feed. It takes some time to process because it's kind of like a new show. First time giving it its own RSS feed. But we're also on YouTube. You'll be able to find our YouTube channel. Just search the Union of the Unwanted. I almost said search the Ripple Effect Podcast. We're in the process of uploading our whole archives. I'm around episode 9 or 10. So when you hear this, maybe All the episodes will be uploaded. I believe there's like 14 or 15 episodes of the Union of Unwanted, so you'll be able to find all of them on our YouTube channel. And in the show description, you'll find links to all our other stuff. The Union of Unwanted on Instagram, Twitter, Float. Soon enough, we'll also be on Odyssey. So we're in the process, but very soon you'll be able to find the Union of Unwanted on whatever podcast platform you use, and you'll be able to find the whole archives on YouTube and Odyssey and BitChute. So we're really excited about continuing this. By the time the next one comes around, we're hoping to have all this stuff done and everything being good to go. And I believe it will be the 14th, the next one, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Follow all of us on social media. Follow the Union of Unwanted on social media, and that way you'll get the updates on where you can find the live stream. So I think that's about it. That's about all the things I had to say. The Union of Unwanted became its own show. The community is growing. We're excited about that. The Ripple Effect podcast is everywhere now. You can find it everywhere. And that's it, right? Support the show if you can. Patreon, PayPal, however you can. Share the show, rate the show, all that stuff. I'll leave it at that. Enjoy the show, guys, and I will see you on the next one. Peace. I like intros afterwards, so I like to jump right into it and not waste anybody's time with doing a long intro. Plus, I always have this awkwardness of I'm like, I want to go through your giant resume to do it justice, but then if I go too far, then it's like, will this guy ever shut up? So it's like this. I
know. We can dive in. Who cares?
but thank you so much for being with me. I have a soft spot in my heart for people who are willing to do what you're doing and be as outspoken as you are and really go against the grain in the way you are. And there's so many things that, there's so many reasons not to do it, right? I mean, for your career, for being pigeonholed as a conspiracy theorist or whatever it may be. And it's really easy to just be silent and just enjoy your very comfortable life and with your popularity and whatnot. And but I like I said, I have a soft spot for people who think that the message and these conversations and what's going on in the world is much more important than being comfortable. And so first, I just want to say thank you for that. And for people who are listening who might not be familiar with some of I mean, I don't know how they're not familiar with some of your work because you've been around for a while and you've been everywhere. But for somebody who maybe hasn't, can you just give a brief description of some of your past projects and work?
Yes, I went into OBGYN because I cried when I saw a baby born. There was nothing else for me to do. And then I began to see that there were some missing pieces in women's health. And so my whole life's work has been to bring in the intuitive, right brain, holistic approach to healing while being a board certified OBGYN. All of that original material went into my very first book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, which has just come out in its 5th edition, bookending my career with the 2 biggest books. I call them the post-Me Too version of The Wisdom of Menopause and Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. They're virtual textbooks, Bibles of holistic women's health. I had to literally invent a language of health. We had all, women's health is disease screening. It's pap smears, it's mammograms, it's blood pressure, it's cholesterol. It has nothing to do with health. It has to do with disease screening. So I actually wanted to write here's what I say. I spent a great deal of my life becoming board certified in everything that could go wrong with the female body. And now I'm spending the rest of my life teaching women everything that can go right with their bodies and making it, giving them the instructions to make it their experience. And I don't think that anyone could have foretold what 2020 was going to be about. But I will tell you this, my whole career has led up to this. I mean, I've been out on the front lines with the arrows in my back for many, many, many years, but never the polarity and censorship, which has always been there, has never gotten to this point. I mean, if you are at a place where you can't see this, I can't help you. It's too late. I mean, at this point, we have got to, as a population on Earth, stand up for our body's ability to be healthy and happy. And that comes through clean water, clean soil, clean air, getting off unnecessary medication. It's literally, we have to get back to regenerative everything, the true causes of health. It's almost like the germ theory of disease and be afraid and be at war against nature. That has reached its final death knell. It's like it's a death rattle, but man, they are going to ride this till the wheels fall off.
Well, something you say that is so important is I think people they underestimate the power of the body and the immune system and its ability to. I mean, we're built to survive, and when there aren't options, I mean, sometimes your best option is just eat healthy, exercise, vitamin D, vitamin C, sunlight, just these things, and the body will do the rest, and you really don't need to. I mean, all this symptom management, let's get into a little bit, because I think what people now think is like pseudoscience or hippy dippy stuff, like, herbs and vitamins and minerals and organic and all this stuff, for a long time was considered medicine. And teas and what we call like Eastern medicine now, and now it's like, if it's not a chemical, which really is designed really for symptom management, it doesn't get to the root cause of the issue, which is another thing that I think people kind of forget, is that when you go to a doctor, they're not getting to the root cause. They're dealing with your symptom. Like I complain about my symptom. They're like, okay, how do I deal with the symptom? If you're constipated, they give you something that gives you diarrhea. If you have diarrhea, they'll give you something that constipates you. But what is
Exactly
causing
right.
these issues in the first place, right?
That's right. Well, we have to really go way back. And the Flexner Report was written by John D. Rockefeller in the 1920s. He paid doctors of the day huge amounts of money to go out and expose the traditional medicine that has been the medicine of our planet for hundreds of years. And overnight almost, they closed the naturopathic medical schools, the homeopathic medical schools, anything having to do with natural anything. They invented the word quack, not unlike the CIA invented the word conspiracy theory, and the pharmaceutical industry invented the term anti-vaxxer. And so anything that was not petroleum-based pharmaceutical medicine was considered quackery. So think about it. We're now at the year 2020. That was 100 years ago. They've done a very good job of making everyone think that things such as, like you said, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, clean water, clean soil, sleep, breathing properly, all of that, that's child's play. In order to really be well, you need a medication, when in fact, one of the things that any good doctor will tell you is that a headache is not an aspirin deficiency. And in women's health, using birth control pills for everything, which is my training, is like covering over the indicator lights on the dashboard of your car with duct tape. So we call it, oh, you go on the pill to regulate your period. No, no, no. You're going on the pill to mask what the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis in your body is doing, that's trying to tell you, hey, a little balance is necessary. Oh, no, 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 no. Just get on synthetic hormones and substitute cycling with the moon to cycling with Father Pharmaceutical. So I remember, I'd be there learning all this stuff thinking, okay, what else you got? I mean, everything is put her on the pill. From honest to God, from like age 12 to menopause, and then at menopause put her on more synthetic hormones, and then you don't need to deal with any of the messages that your body is giving you that your life is out of balance. And it's coming through your menstrual cycle, or it's coming through these processes of the female body, all of which are opportunities to get healthier. The menstrual cycle is one of the most incredible cycles on earth. It's the cycle from which all life, all human life comes, unless, we go toward the New World Order where all new life will come from some frickin' test tube. But, let's just assume that we still have people who are fertile despite big pharma and the fact that, they're giving vaccines. I mean, I was at a pro-vaccine choice rally in Hartford, and a beautiful 18-year-old girl came up to me and she said, "I don't know what to do. I am menopausal after taking the Gardasil vaccine." And we know that a side effect of the Gardasil vaccine is infertility, both with boys and girls. So all that to say, we need to remember that as human beings, we are creators. We have a particle of God within us, and this is enormous power. And currently on planet Earth, there is an intelligence, you could call it the service to self group or the controllers, that doesn't have empathy, doesn't have creativity, and is just trying to milk the creativity and empathy of humanity, not unlike the movie The Matrix, which I consider a documentary.
That's funny, actually. I've never heard somebody say that, but you're kind of right, right? And so many people who are waking up. I mean, they're referring to that whole scene, like get red pilled. You need to red pill people. You need, that whole theme just kind of is popular in people who go against the grain. Because I think the more you learn, the more you realize, like, wow, I had everything that I thought I knew wrong, and it's scary. And I think that's why some people really do push back. I think the idea that everything's an illusion is scary for people. It's easier sometimes, ignorance is bliss. But the whole birth control thing, it is funny because Dr. Thomas Cowan, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Thomas Cowan.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, he's been on my show, and I remember when he talked about like fevers, for example. Your body temperature is high, and we like to immediately try to put a stop to it.
Right.
But your body is very intelligent, and usually it's doing something to protect it, or it's like when you have food poisoning. It's because it's trying to get something out of your stomach that it doesn't want there. It knows isn't good for you. So same thing with same type of a philosophy with looking at high temperature or whatnot. Like, you shouldn't try to minimize that because your body actually might be attempting to sweat something out. So it was like this whole other perspective on all these things that we call symptoms that we should be attempting to restrict, when really a lot of times it's your body's natural functions, and it could probably do some harm if you do get in the way of those natural things that are happening.
Well, that includes the childhood illnesses, measles, mumps, chicken pox. All of those actually serve a purpose. We know that children who've had measles are far more resilient to different types of cancer later in life. And in traditional Chinese medicine, when a child gets chicken pox, the soul has decided to stay. And it's interesting that when my children were little, I tried repeatedly to expose them to chicken pox. They never got it till they were 12 and 14, no matter what I did, because obviously their souls hadn't made the decision yet. And I'll never forget that, because we have this idea that if you're exposed to something, you'll get it, when in fact the vast majority of people exposed to anything don't get it. And if you've had Dr. Cowan on your show, then I know you've done a deep dive into the germ theory of disease, and is it even accurate? But at this point, I think we're beyond the point of even arguing about that, because our individual liberties are at stake from a weaponized public health system that is, doing its best to take care of you. I mean, by putting fluoride in the water that calcifies your pineal gland. I mean, come on. I mean, there's got to be, what I know is the degree of censorship has been unbelievable. When this whole thing started, there were my doctor colleagues in the holistic medicine field, and Dr. Zelenko and Dr. Simone Gold and some others, and they would come out with these fantastic approaches to COVID that were 100% effective. And as soon as they'd have a video on YouTube, it would get removed. And I remember thinking, something's fishy with this, because who cares? I mean, if vitamin C takes care of it, vitamin D, and finally now in the UK, they are apparently using a lot of vitamin D, which should have been something we did from the very, very beginning. There are things, it doesn't matter in a way whether you believe that the virus is real, not real. You know, there's all the stuff is, have they even ever isolated it? I got to tell you, you know, having listened to Dr. Cowan and Dr. Andy Kaufman, one of my heroes, Zach Bush, I don't even know. I mean, as a board certified doctor, I don't even know. What I do know is whether it's exosomes from toxins, no matter what it is, we have ways to help the body get healthy that are completely non-toxic, and 99.9% of people recover from this thing, whatever it is. And according to Johns Hopkins, the death rate, the number total people that have died this year is no different from 2019, except that they've got this bump called COVID, and then the number of heart attack and cancer cases is way down. So it's almost like, oh, I see, COVID came in and cured heart disease and cancer. How clever, when we know darn well it's just the way that they've been keeping the data. In our own state of Maine, I had to laugh. They've stopped reporting flu cases because of COVID. Oh, how convenient for you. And then if you try to get the information from your state health department, they'll stonewall you there. One of my friends who was a legislator in California was trying to get the vital statistics with how many people have died from suicide, how many people have died from drug overdoses. And they said, oh, we don't, that's not available. So, you know, you have to be quite deeply asleep or continually hypnotized by the mainstream media to not realize that there's something a little odd or untoward going on here, where if something has a 99.9% survival rate, and if children don't get it ever, why are we masking our children? In New York City, they just passed a resolution. They're going to test the children every week with a PCR test, which we know has a 98% false positive rate. We also know that the replication cycles are sort of built into the test, and nothing more than 25 replication cycles will tell you anything, but the tests are using 40. So it's crazy.
Yeah, in Portugal, they just went to court, and I try to keep up with it because I was born in Portugal, so I keep up with the news. And sometimes they, and I'm also in the East Coast. I live in Massachusetts, so not too far from you. And yeah, and some we can get into also Charlie Baker, who is just some of the stuff that he's done has just been outrageous. But Cuomo's too, all these crazy dictators. I mean, the fact that you've decided that they couldn't prescribe hydroxychloroquine for political reasons. That should be between the physician and the patient. Like the fact that you, who have no PhD, never studied medicine, is deciding that. And I remember growing up, I was always really motivated by the anti-war movement and just, overseas geopolitics. And when I studied history, I was always super fascinated with, like, wow, man, the military industrial complex has lied to us so many times. They have such extreme methods of convincing us of things. And I'm like, they're the biggest threat to humanity. And then I've always been into diet, nutrition, and eating healthy and exercise. And little by little, I'm like, wow, this big pharma thing. I'm like, this seems to be like a bigger machine than the military industrial complex. And getting so into medicine and natural herbs. And I remember having Dr. Brzezinski on like in 2014, and I barely had a platform, and I was getting trolls and people.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm just like, wait, I've never had this much interaction online ever. I just started my podcast in 2013, and all of a sudden I have all this interaction. I'm like, this is obviously just people trying to spread false information, because they were telling me that it was pseudoscience, and he's, there's blood on his hands. And I'm like, and then you look at the accounts, they're made up accounts or robots or whatever. So I'm like, who the hell are paying people to do this? And you realize like how big of a machine it is. And then so many documentaries. I've had Del Bigtree on quite a few times. I remember him talking about how he had a contract with Amazon that his movie Vax was supposed to be on Amazon Prime forever. And all of a sudden they just pull it. And then I also had Dr. Susan Dowen, who had she had a great documentary called The Big Secret, which was a goes into what you talked about, the Flexer Report, and a lot of
Yeah.
this history that people aren't familiar with, the AMA, and how they kind of decided what is medicine and what isn't medicine, and kind of made us rethink what medicine was. And that gets pulled off Amazon Prime. So like, and you see over and over again anything that goes against the grain. And the funny thing is, typically in our lives, if I went to go get a second opinion from a doctor, it's completely acceptable if he disagrees with the other doctor. Like, it's not uncommon for doctors to look at information and come up with different conclusions. But during this lockdown, if any doctor said anything against what the mainstream doctors were saying, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, it was pseudoscience. It was being censored. I had Mickey Willis on my show. They were going in people's personal clouds, ripping that documentary out of people's personal accounts. They locked his Wikipedia page. He was the extent and the collusion of all of them. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. People have to. It's just like that World War II quote. When they came for the Jews, I did nothing. When they came for I did nothing, and then they came for me, and there was nobody else to defend me or nobody else to fight with me or however it goes. But the point is, like, nobody cares about censorship when they're not censoring the stuff you like. But eventually, it's going to, and when it does, it's going to be too late. And so, I think people in the alternative medicine world has seen the censorship already a long time ago and could foresee just the power of the censorship, especially the vaccine debate. Because I'm open. I say it all the time. My kids have never had a vaccine. I have a healthy 5-year-old boy and 4-year-old girl. I say it publicly because I know how pediatricians can scare the crap out of parents, and they need to hear that there are kids who are alive and doing well, and in many cases better than vaccinated kids. No allergies, no anything. And they're not going to die if you don't vaccinate your kids, because that's what the pediatricians will do. They'll scare you to eventually give in. And so I think people do need to be outspoken. But you see with the vaccine debate, just give people the information, let them decide. If you decide that the risk of not vaccinating your child is equal or less or more than vaccinating, then that's your choice. But what really bothers me is the fact that you can't make a choice, or at least an educated choice, informed choice, if the information is being censored and manipulated.
You certainly cannot, and even among doctors cannot have a discussion among themselves. And now, of course, because we passed a vaccine mandate in our state, the doctors who were perfectly happy with spacing, with giving philosophical exemptions for whatever, have been silenced. They're afraid that their own licenses will be pulled. And they're also, one of my friends teaches at the local medical school, and he said the medical students are actually given misinformation about what's in vaccines. Because if you were to just give all parents the package insert to read, that's true informed consent. But it's interesting that when it comes to vaccines, you can't even have that discussion. And whenever something's off the table to that degree, then everybody's hairs on the back of their neck should go up. And if you read Suzanne Humphrey's amazing book, Dissolving Illusions, you will see that the vaccine agenda was hijacked years ago. Or if you look at Andy Wakefield's latest documentary, 1986, The Act, which is available on Seventh Chakra Films, it is shocking, the history of vaccines. And in 1986, which probably your listeners know, the government under Reagan gave vaccine manufacturers carte blanche, do whatever you want, you have absolutely no risk. Talk about a business model. We're going to mandate that for everyone in your state, and you're going to get paid, and there's no liability. I mean, wow. I have liability for my social media and for all of that. I have to have publicity liability for what I say. They got nothing, and they're killing people. We know that Pfizer is a serial felon. They all are. They've just paid enormous amounts of money. There's a movie that was out last year, Dark Waters, with Mark Ruffalo, about DuPont.
I had that attorney on my show. I had the attorney that he plays was on my show.
You did?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, so he's been at it. for years. And here I am watching it saying, how did I not know about C8? How did I not know this? I mean, and this is what, talk about the military industrial complex. That's what we have now. And they own our government. They own our politicians. And so right now, you know, I really believe that we are in World War III, and the enemy is evil. It's good against evil is what we're talking about here. It's not Democratic versus Republican, although it would appear that the Democratic Party is the one that's been hijacked, because at least here in Maine, we were shocked that it was pretty much the Democratic Party that pushed through the legislation. And, you know, these were lifelong Democrats were shocked by that, because it's not the same party of John F. Kennedy. It's really different at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too is that one thing that's been really weird to me is how, like, my opinions and perspectives haven't changed, but the parties have changed drastically. Because you think
Yeah.
of, like, legalizing marijuana and using it, seeing it as a medicine, and also like the kratom thing. You know, I've done shows on kratom, and so it's like all these things that, like, yeah, natural herbs and vitamins and all these things are good things and whatnot. And then, like, all of a sudden it's like, no, trust big pharma, and it's like usually the left was very
Yeah.
anti-chemicals, and big chemical companies and corporations are bad. So it's like they're really bad unless they're talking about vaccines. All of a sudden they put all the really moral people on the vaccine department. Like, what, like you said, they're criminals. Like, they've all been fined, they've been sued, they've have, you know, just example after example of caring more about profit than people. And why do you think vaccines would be any different?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're not any different. In fact, when you look at the number of people now who've been vaccine injured, there's a guy I follow on Twitter, Toby, can't remember his last name, but he's done the economics of autism. And he points out that, like in the 1960s, 1 in 10,000 kids had autism. Now it's 1 in 34. But, you know, but it's anything but the vaccines. Oh, no. So, you know, that's just the genetics, and his parents are really 1 in 10,000, now 1 in 34. And let's look everywhere else. Let's look at GMO foods. Let's look at the water, but let's not look at the 69 mandated vaccines. And the fact that now at this point, I'll tell you one of the things in my field of OBGYN that I find horrifying, and that is, they're now giving all pregnant women DPT and flu shots in the second trimester. This goes right into the fetal brain. Then 99% of American newborns are getting a hepatitis B vaccine, which contains 15 times the FDA allowable amount of aluminum. And it isn't even aluminum like, you know, like your aluminum wrap or from an aluminum pan. No, it's nanoparticles. It's a type that's never been seen before that we know goes into the brain. So all newborns pretty much already have the toxicity of vaccines in their bodies at birth. Then we add 69 more doses of 17 vaccines by the age of 18. But that's not who they were really coming for. They're coming for the adult mandates, and that's what the COVID agenda is. And if you look at what's in that vaccine, we've never had an mRNA vaccine that was successful, not one. And the way it's supposed to work is that the mRNA, the messenger RNA, is supposed to go into your genome, your cell, and then make your cell into a factory to produce antibodies against the spike protein of the COVID virus. But we don't know if it's really going to do it because it's been so fast tracked. And we know that those in the, you know, in the clinical trials have not been set up to determine whether the vaccines will decrease death or decrease hospitalizations. Here's what they've been found to do: decrease symptoms. Well, guess what? The vast majority of people who've been exposed to COVID, just like the common cold, don't get it. They don't get sick. So what are we doing with this global vaccination program? You won't be able to go back to work until this thing that doesn't kill most people, until you're all vaccinated against something you were never going to get anyway. And by the way, people are getting sick and they are dying, but not anywhere near the numbers, because a case is not a death. A case is a made up number from a bogus test.
It is
And
the case also. Well, people need to, and maybe you can clarify this for me. When there's a case, and again, the PCR test I think is complete bullshit.
it is.
The guy who created it. I mean, he passed away late last year, but I mean, he even said it's not accurate. It's not a test, really. It's a method. But
That's right.
Even if you believe that it works or these tests work and they're accurate, you're really not testing positive for COVID, because COVID's the disease, right? So it's like this idea of like, oh, he has COVID. Aren't we kind of like overusing that term, because we're actually testing for the virus, not the disease, right?
Yes, and here's the thing. At any replication amount beyond 25, all you're going to find, and even Fauci said this, is some dead pieces of RNA, just some dead nucleotides, as it were. But the CDC testing, and the testing used in many states, has a replication of over 40, which means that you really don't know if somebody is infectious. I just learned today from someone that I interviewed with that he had a friend where one nostril, they just did this to see, one nostril tested positive and the other nostril tested negative. And then we have some guys in a local fire department, and just for fun, they figured they'd send in 4 tests without anyone actually doing anything. And they didn't even open them, and they came back positive. And we've all heard those stories. And so it's, let me be clear, it's a giant psychological operation to just scare the bejesus out of people, because what we need to know is the death rate. And the death rate is not going up at all. We had a spike there at the beginning, for reasons that, I'm not clear about. Was it 5G? Was it, I don't know, because I know whole Black communities in Brooklyn who didn't get sick because they're very aware of vitamin D and nutrition and all of that. So we really don't know. And the second wave, even a former Pfizer executive said, the second wave is just fake. They just made it up. Because remember when we started just pouring out the testing. So now you got to be tested all the time with a bogus test that doesn't pick up anything. It doesn't tell you anything. Oh, one of my friends took the course at Johns Hopkins, a physician, just so she could know what she was supposed to know. She said, okay, anyone who tests positive is a case. Anyone who's near anyone who tested positive is a case. And anyone who has the symptoms is a case. There's a lot of reasons to get a runny nose, to get a fever, to feel like you have the flu that are not related to COVID. So, and then if you've been around any of those people, you're a case. So that's how it's mind-boggling that we have been able to control the population to this extent. It's just mind-boggling. And actually, how we're doing it with public policy is, in my opinion, crimes against humanity. It's crimes against humanity. And if you do the economic work, you see that this has killed many, many more people.
Well, that's the thing about these doctors that are experts in one field, is that they're not looking at all the other aspects of backlash because of the lockdown. I mean, from suicide rates, the people who were going to AA who couldn't anymore and needed to, people who went to church and enjoyed that community and just being around others and gave them like a peace of mind. Like all these things are important. People losing their businesses. I mean, we just mandated the flu vaccine not too long ago in Massachusetts, which, a lot of people were upset, surprisingly. But I had to stop myself, and I'm like, listen, people, like, why are you upset about the flu vaccine for your kids to go to school? You do realize there's a bunch of other vaccines on that list that's already been mandated for your kid to go to school. Like, you should be mad about all of them. It's like,
yeah, no, that's exactly right. I just testified in our state on November 23rd. The Maine CDC launched a rule-making hearing, and the only reason that anyone was available publicly to comment was that those of us who are in the medical freedom space saw what they were trying to do under cover of darkness and demanded a public hearing. And 39 people testified via Zoom. Only 5 were for it. And one of the ones who was for it was the director of the Maine Medical Association, meaning paid by Big Pharma. And there were 3 people who, kind of live in bubbles and were really afraid that if they went outside, they would get sick. So therefore, everyone needs to have the vaccine. My testimony, which is a matter of public record, was to show that if you get the flu vaccine, you're 5 times more likely to get every other respiratory virus, including COVID. So therefore, there's no good
study too, right? The Pentagon also had a study that proved something very
Yeah.
similar, right?
That's exactly right. And we also have studies showing that if you are vaccinated and you're spreading live virus, you're actually more dangerous than those who haven't been vaccinated. So, I sent in testimony, a bunch of us doctors did. But what we really learned from the National Vaccine Information Center is that this entire rulemaking process was illegal. So we've asked them to please withdraw that mandate information and resubmit it through normal legislative channels. But our legislature hasn't met since March, when our emperor declared a state of emergency, which she just keeps rolling through. And then she does interesting things like she'll say to the bars or restaurants, okay, you can open again. And they'll spend the money to get ready. And then, bam, the hammer falls. Oh, sorry, we're in a state of emergency. She's done that twice. And what I know in other states, you cannot keep declaring a state of emergency without public comment. And I don't know what the legality of that is. Eventually, this is all going to come out, this kind of tyranny. And I hope a bunch of them end up where they should be.
Well, I mean, look at Newsom.
Oh God!
This guy was telling people to wear a mask and pull it down while you eat. While just in between chewing or something like that, or
Yeah.
and this guy is going out celebrating a birthday and all this. I'm like, do you need more evidence that they don't even believe the nonsense that's coming out of their mouths?
No, of course, we have pictures of Janet Mills officiating at a wedding in July with no mask on. I mean, this is, do as I say, not as I do. Scare everyone to death. This is not governance. This is tyrannical dictatorship.
And people have to speak up, because the thing is, the military industrial complex, even though they were very bad in regards to promoting wars and getting us into wars, most people, they could go on with their everyday lives. They weren't that affected. But this, you can't ignore this. It's not like a war in Syria where you're like, I can still go to work. I can still bring my kids to the park. This is coming for you. It's coming to your personal life. It's affecting you. I think I had Dr. Madej on, Carrie Madej on.
Oh, she's great. She's
awesome. Yeah. And we were talking about how, and I think when I had her on, they were proposing it, but I think it was just passed now that in DC, if you're 11, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? That you can consent to a vaccine without your parents' knowledge. Like, what?
Well, let me tell you how bad that is. The kid is told, don't tell your parents, and they're not going to put it in the medical record. So imagine that your child goes home, they have a seizure, or they have whatever it is, but they're not going to tell you what they had, and it's not in the record. And what if another grandparent took them in to get them vaccinated again? There's no record that they've had it. I mean, it is so fraught with medical malpractice, and yet it passed the DC Council by, I think it was 11-3, something of that nature. And I believe that today is the last day it's going to be on Muriel Bowser's desk, and then it goes to Congress. Now, who are the people in Washington, D.C.? Primarily African Americans. And we know that African American boys, for instance, are 3 times more likely to get autism from an MMR shot. And that's been proven. And Thomas at the CDC, the whistleblower, proved it.
Thompson. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the Vaxxed movie. So here we are. Oh, let's rush, shall we? Let's rush to vaccinate all our Native Americans and all of our Black people. Does that sound like genocide to me, to you? It does to me. And I work with a group of people in Newark, the Urban Global Health Alliance. And they're basically saying to the public health authorities, we remember Tuskegee. So why don't you take it first? We'll watch you for a year, see how that goes.
Well, one thing I'm really hopeful for, and I'm excited, is that a lot of the minority communities, like the Black community, they aren't willing to take this vaccine, even though it's their political party. In most cases, it's their
Yes,
political
it
party
is.
pushing
Yeah.
it. And,
Yeah.
and yet they're still like, hell no, we're not going to trust you with a vaccine. I mean, like you said, like people don't see the inserts. They don't see that there's chemicals in there. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr., when he fought to get the Marisol out of vaccines, if you were getting a vaccine prior to that, before they proved that it was more mercury than your body should be getting, a pediatrician or a doctor would have told you it's safe. There's no proof. There's no proof. There's no proof. Well, and then they did prove it. So, I mean, the thing is, like, people just don't know what's in these things, and they're so willing to just completely do something unnatural. And that's, if you get something in a natural world, if you get a virus, I mean, it has to, you get it, usually it's on the outside of your body and then it works its way in. You're literally skipping all that and going right into your bloodstream. It's not just a virus. I mean, there's tons of other things in it to keep it alive, and preservatives and all these other things. And then even like the MMR vaccine, getting 3 things together at once. I mean, there's no studies to prove that this is safe, effective. There's no, I mean, the amount of research, and that's how that Vax documentary, I mean, that's how that whole research came about. Dr. Brian Hooker was just like curious on like, hey, where's the studies? What do you have to prove? Because he had a vaccine injured child, and I had Dr. Brian Hooker on. He's told this story, and people look at that documentary like it's an anti-vax documentary. It's not.
Nope.
It's a cover-up documentary. It's about a cover-up, and it's about a CDC whistleblower. So it got demonized because mainstream media is bought and paid for. Not even, I mean, everything from Today's Show, every show would demonize that documentary, and most people would just brush it off as an anti-vax documentary without even knowing the actual story, and that Dr. William Thompson was actually the author. He wasn't just an employee of the CDC. He was the author of the study and felt guilty enough to talk about it and share the study with Dr. Brian Hooker. So it's amazing the power of the media and propaganda. And unfortunately, getting shows, because even your interview with Polly, it's impossible to find now online. I mean, they just scraped the stuff. It went viral. I had people sending it to me. I'm like, oh, I've actually had Polly on before, and all of a sudden, it's impossible to find. Like, you can't even inform yourself, even if you want to.
Well, it's on BitChute, and I talked to Polly last night we had an emergency meeting about the Washington, D.C. Muriel Bowser thing with 11-year-olds. And Polly told me that things had 10 million views. So it somehow got around, but it is currently on BitChute. So if anyone is interested, and for whatever reason, I got my information initially from Dr. Carrie Madej. She's the one who woke me up to that.
Really?
And I was thinking, how is it that my thing went viral? Carrie's should have been the one to go viral. And, and so you can imagine the sort of emails that has generated. What are your sources? And here's the thing, I just saw a thing that there are little tiny robots that they can put, no bigger than a dust particle, that they can put on the end of a swab. I've been working with an investigative reporter in New York City so that we can really do a deep dive on this transhumanism agenda. And it's very real. So what I would say to everyone, go to Joe Mercola's website, mercola.com, subscribe to his e-letter, and just write in transhumanism, and you'll be able to see Dr. Carrie Madej. And then, by the way, when you go to her website, all of the supporting documents, like she's got a line of references like that, and about 2/3 of them have now been censored. So, and here's another thing you hear from people, here's what you hear. Well, if that were true, I would have heard about it. It's like, no, you wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that's the. I've told the story a lot on the show, so I'm gonna try to make it quick. But I've had Jim Abrams on my show before. He's the guy who the filmmaker who did Naked Gun and Airplane, all those movies. Some of my favorite movies growing up. I still watch them from time to time and still laugh like it's the first time I watched it. But he was on my show because he has this thing called the Charlie Foundation, and he had all access to all the best hospitals and doctors and all this stuff. He had a son who was having really violent seizures, and nobody told him that you could possibly cure these seizures with the ketogenic diet. So he had
Yeah,
years of, and I do keto. I've been doing keto for a long time. I fast every day, and but so I had multiple reasons to have him on and chat with him. But his story, to me, is important. The reason why I keep repeating it is because that exact thing you said. It's like, oh, if there was a treatment out there, I would have heard about it. And it's like he had access to all the best doctors, all the best hospitals. He had friends that donated or gave money to hospitals. He got to cut in line, talk to all the best people, and he had years and years of prescription drugs, a surgery that his son didn't need, and then he found a natural dietary way to cure his
yeah,
son. And then he started a Charlie Foundation named after his son about ketogenic therapies. But there's also like Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who actually Dr. Dominic D'Agostino told me about, and I really got into his work. Who wrote Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, and he has 150 peer-reviewed studies, and he looks into how you can use the ketogenic diet and ketosis as a therapy to fight cancer cells and kill cancer cells. I mean, we all kind of know that like glucose is the energy source, so it kind of makes sense that if you suppress glucose or completely remove it from your diet, there's a good chance you're going to have some positive results. But yet, because there's no pill and there's nothing you can sell, nobody's interested in his work. So without a doubt, I know that people think that if my doctor didn't recommend it to me, it must be pseudoscience, it must be quackery, like you said. But there's an example of that not being true.
absolutely. And I've seen it for my entire career. I was president of the American Holistic Medical Association along with Bernie Siegel in the 90s. And every day, those of us involved in holistic medicine, I remember that time I'd go into the hospital, look in my doctor's mailbox, to make sure, see if my eviction notice was there yet. I had a doctor friend down in Washington, D.C., and he said, every day I go over to my window, I open it, I yell out the word holistic, and then I shut it again. I mean, the truth is they've been, murdering holistic doctors here for years. Oh, look at Nikola Tesla. He had a wonderful magnetic free energy thing, and his lab got, completely brutalized. I mean, this is the history of the planet at the moment. Everyone who came out with anything that would help masses of people that was inexpensive, oh, we got to get rid of that. But I do believe, okay, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think that this stuff that's going on has been going on for so long, and now it's all up where you can see it, and people are waking up by the droves. I mean, this is, you just look at what's happening. All those, I was watching some guy on Fox News making fun of all the different governors. I guess it was New Mexico, only 5 people in your house. And then in Vermont, they were actually, when the kids go back to school, they were going to ask them, did the wrong people come to their house so you can make your kids into snitches? I mean, it's gotten so incredibly bad that it's hard not to notice it. And I go to bed at night thinking, okay, it only took 1% to 3% of people to start the American Revolution. And I think we've at least got that many who are awake at this point. So we'll just have to, boots on the ground. I work with Pam Popper out of Ohio, make Americans free again. Everyone should go there. We got to keep it simple. I'm a one-issue voter. Do you or do you not believe in mandated vaccines? If the answer is that they believe in mandated vaccines, no. In Maine, we voted in a lot of people who are pro-informed consent, pro-vaccine choice. We all need to get organized around something very, very simple: medical freedom and informed consent. Everything flows from there, because when you weaponize public health, which is what we've done, that leads to the tyranny we're seeing, like the COVID passport, and you're going to need a COVID vaccine before getting on a plane, and we're going to stop you at the state border, and you've got to come here, but you've got to quarantine for 2 weeks. We've got to uncouple the public health establishment with policing abilities, which is why I joined Sheriff Andrew Mack's Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, and give him money every month. Like, keep going, because our sheriffs might be the only answer that we have at this point.
Yeah, I think something that's kind of helped is that, like, locally they started, well, in Massachusetts they started a curfew at 9:30 for no reason, and out of nowhere 2 weeks ago all restaurants had to close at 9:30. My wife's a waitress. I mean, she's been hit hard because people just, they're not hanging around as much, or if it's kind of later in the day, they're like, you know what, we might be kicked out and rushed, so let's just eat at home. And I think also with the uncertainty of the future, with the new presidency and conversations of lockdowns, people are a little bit more worried about spending money because they don't know how long they'll be working for or whatnot. So they're having such a economic effect on so many people. And for what? To minimize cases?
No.
I'm talking about cases. I mean,
no.
This goes into what you were saying, the transhumanism, the depopulation. There is some hope, because I think that the conversation about vaccines and, like, Bill Gates, is he really just a good guy who just wants to save the world, or is he real? People are becoming much more open to these conversations about, like, maybe there's more to this Bill Gates guy than meets the eye. He's talking about the population and how we need a smaller population, but yet he wants to vaccinate everybody. That doesn't seem like that makes sense. It's like, and then you look at his history. I mean, it's just, and I tell people, I'm like, even regardless of all that stuff, an example I use over and over again, because and people seem to like it because it's simple, is if you mandate anything to everybody, you're going to kill some people. For example, if I mandated peanut butter and jelly for every kid in the world, some kids are going to die. There's some kids are going to have allergic reaction and they're going to die. So does that sound like a good idea? Like, you shouldn't. People's bodies are different. They react to different, things in different ways. So if you mandate the same cocktail of ingredients to every single child, and you don't know, if their immune system's compromised, you don't know, what's in the vaccine that they're putting into your child. I mean, when a baby's born, like, they talk about washing your hands and don't let anybody from the outside come see the baby and whatnot. So you're basically admitting their immune system is delicate and fragile, but yet you're going to shoot it up with a vaccine immediately. How does that make sense?
Yeah, including, by the way, the preemies in the NICU. I've talked to nurses who say they had to quit because it hurts their heart to be giving that many vaccines to a 4-pound baby.
Wow.
Because it's not done by dosages. This is the dose, period. Whether you're a 10-pound baby or you're a 4-pound baby. This makes no sense. When you come to vaccine science, it makes no sense. But when you go to the mainstream medical people, here's what you hear over and over. It's like someone stuck in a tape, and it says, vaccines are safe and effective. They are the most effective public health strategy ever invented by humanity. The adverse side effects are 1 in a million. That is completely wrong. Clean air, clean water, a healthy immune system, sunlight has done more for humanity than vaccines. So we need to go back to square one and remember what keeps us healthy and get over the war on germs. I mean, we have to do regenerative agriculture inside our bodies. We're learning about the microbiome and how, when our gut bacteria are balanced, we have gazillions of viruses in us. Viruses exist to transfer information between cells. And as Zach Bush says, when we're in balance, then you won't find a virus. Even HIV will not cause AIDS if things are balanced. And that's where we have to be headed. We are at the crossroads of the old argument between Louis Pasteur and Antoine Beauchamp. And Beauchamp said, it's the environment, not the germ. Pasteur said, it's the germ, not the environment. Pasteur won. I think Beauchamp is catching up very quickly.
Yeah, the whole germ theory thing. Like, I've never been I grew up right out of high school. I worked construction. I was surrounded by guys who went to work every day, worked long days, but they're outside. They're doing what their bodies were naturally meant to do: move and lift things and sweat and get fresh air and get sun all day. And I'm like, wait, these guys are like, if there's no water around, they're just going to eat their lunch regardless if their hands are clean or not.
Yeah.
And I don't ever see these guys sick. I'm like, I'm like, these are some of the healthiest guys ever, and they're constantly doing very labor intensive jobs. They're not over cleaning anything. Like, this is it does this whole germ thing just, and then you see it with the parents that over sanitize things. You know,
Oh,
they use
oh,
it for everything. I'm like, you are killing your kid's immune system.
that's
You're
right.
doing harm.
Who isn't dying right now? Ready, kids? The homeless.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's right. Has anybody kept track of that? Like, so how do they explain that? Right?
Yeah, exactly. How do you explain that? Yeah.
Yeah,
There's all kinds of things that, that are inexplicable, but the main thing is, to me, the virus is fear, and the super spreader is the mainstream media, period.
and Dr. Drew was actually, he initially, and I know he has some links to Dr. Fauci during the AIDS epidemic and whatnot, but he was outspoken about, like, hey, this is just a bad flu, and everybody was like, oh, that Dr. Drew's crazy. The things that are publicly acceptable now, like me saying that 99% of us are gonna be fine, like 9 months ago, I would have been banned off every platform for saying that, or people would have attacked me for saying, no, it's way worse than the flu. It's not, it's much more serious. It spreads more. I'm like, the information changes daily, or sometimes every hour. I mean, from it spreads in the air, it doesn't spread in the air. The sunlight kills it. The sunlight doesn't kill it. I'm like, how many times are you going to be lied to before, you finally said, I've had enough? But I think that kind of works in their favor, because I don't know about your experiences talking to people, but my experiences, I know a lot of people who are like, I don't know what to believe. I'm just gonna wear a mask. I'm just gonna go along with the herd. I'm just gonna believe Big Brother because I just don't know. So sometimes the conflicting information works in their favor, because people get scared and they're like, well, I don't know what to believe, so I'm just gonna wear a mask. I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. And but people need to think for themselves. They need to question things, and also the censorship thing. I mean, thank God there is BitChute. I just did I do every couple weeks, I do a Zoom conference call with a bunch of people from alternative media called the Union of the Unwanted. And yesterday we had a bunch of people we've had Dell on, we've had G. Edward Griffin on, we've had a bunch of really interesting people. But yesterday I wanted to get a bunch of people from alternative platforms, we had people from Float, from what now having a brain fart, from Library or Odyssey, and I was trying to get somebody from BitChute, but I also had somebody from Rockfin and all these other tech companies and software companies, and who are helping. And you talk to the CEOs and the people who create these things, they're motivated by just information, like just freedom of speech. Let people say what they want. You shouldn't be censoring ideas. You fight bad ideas with good ideas. You don't
Yeah,
you don't just shut it down and stop it. And like I always say, like we were saying on this show, I was saying it earlier about how it's easy to not care about censorship when they're censoring the other political party or the other point of view. But one day you're going to be the victim, and it's going to be too late.
yeah, that's right. Listen, I didn't know about any of those platforms you just talked about other than BitChute, so I'm excited about that,
Yeah.
because it's very clear to me that, I need to go on to Parler, and a lot of my colleagues are on Telegram. Obviously, BitChute has some stuff. So I believe that eventually those platforms with the censorship, Zach Bush talks about the second law of thermodynamics, and that is, if you separate a system from the rest of nature, you create chaos. So you put on a mask, you're going to create chaos in your immune system and so on. But also, if you censor, then you are creating a situation that will eventually lead to the end of your platform. So everyone's going to leave.
And that's why I think Parler and BitChute and all these places are really just growing with popularity, because I said it last night on last night's show. if the censorship was mild, like it has been for a while, where they shadow ban people,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you just have 1,000 less subscribers overnight. People aren't getting notifications that you're uploading material. When it was kind of mild, people are like, okay, I know they're doing it, but the convenience of it is worth it. It's on
Right.
every
Right.
TV, it's
Right.
on every app, it's on every Fire Stick, whatever it may be. But now it's gone so belligerent that literally you can't find anything useful on YouTube anymore. Like, unless you're watching cooking or cat videos or
Yeah.
how-to videos or YouTubers who are just talking about whatever, yeah, and just the current gossip stuff, then if you actually want to listen or watch something thought-provoking, you can't do that on YouTube. You used to be able to go down some rabbit holes and really learn some things and be exposed to some really interesting content. And now it's like, it's more than ever, it's obvious that they have an agenda. They're pushing it. I mean, there's people who work for Google. One of the founders on their Wikipedia page says gives millions to the Democratic Party and Democratic organizations. I mean, if you don't think they have an agenda, and the thing about the mainstream media is, like, you kind of feel like Fox News and see it like balanced out with MSNBC a little bit. You had like a left newspapers and right leaning
Yeah.
newspapers,
Yeah.
but the problem is so many people younger than us get all their information from big tech and social media platforms. So when you're controlling that information, you're controlling the masses. It's brainwashing. I mean, it's social engineering. I mean, whatever term you want to use. Your opinions are only as good as the information you have access to. You're controlling the information. You're controlling people's opinions, and I think people should be worried about that. But on the bright side, I do think Float and Library and Odyssey, and also this company. He's a big, like, kind of libertarian and about freedom of content and whatnot, called Content Safe. He's another guy who, what he does, and I think his software is like a game changer, because somebody like me who's a content creator, even like yourself who does videos,
Right.
it's a pain in the ass to go to on each individual
Oh
website
God, yes,
and
yes, yes.
upload it. And what he does is that he has software where you upload it to one spot and then he puts it everywhere else. So
Ooh, that's good to know.
yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
awesome. Like, I brought him on yesterday to talk to a bunch of content creators, because I'm like, listen, what he's doing is awesome. And he was actually motivated by the fact that he saw censorship being an issue, and he didn't want people's stuff to disappear, because there's people who strictly are on YouTube. YouTube decides, no, we're going to make your stuff disappear, and then thousands and thousands of hours of content just gone forever with no explanation. You can't talk to a human being, and
Yep.
that's it. So he was kind of motivated by the idea, well, if I can make it go to a bunch of different places, it's much harder, because there's not one central spot. If you shut down this spot, it's at a bunch of other websites. So similar like you, I'm all for these new up and coming places, but the problem is it's so time consuming to go to each one, and you don't know which one's going to take off. And so you might spend
All
a bunch
right.
of time uploading on one that disappears after 6 months. So it is I think he did resolve a problem that many of us needed resolved. So
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
have
Well,
I'll send you some of these people's contact
I
information.
would love that. That would be great. That would be great. But in the meantime, I at least have a website, drnorthrup.com, and stuff is on there. Not my real controversial stuff. I just do a nightly check-in. But because I don't think they've figured out how to, like, I don't include links. I don't include any of that. I just talk about things and tell people where to go. And I don't think that they have figured out, other than in a title, how to censor all of my speech. So, I have a very nice, right out there in the open, hidden in plain sight group. And, but I'll eventually go to something else, maybe Patreon, although I see that Patreon's deplatforming people as well.
Yeah. There's people who they just won't, to kick them off Patreon, and a lot of these content creators, they don't. I mean, they're running out of places to go, and I think when one door closes, another one opens, and I think people are now. They're not just open to going to alternatives. They're seeking alternatives. People are actually like, okay, I'm done with these platforms. Let's go to these other alternatives. Sam Tripoli is a friend of mine, and we do a lot of shows together. He's also one of my co-hosts on the Union Unwanted, and he's like, nobody thought MySpace was going to die, right? People thought, well, that was so huge. People are like, oh, that's never going to end. This thing is huge. And next thing you know, it's like talking about dinosaurs, it's
That's
ancient
right.
history, so these platforms like to think that like, oh, they're untouchable, but it's just a matter of time before the next new thing comes and it takes off, and then they're left behind. And and I think their collusion and them working together, I mean, regardless what you feel about Alex Jones or whoever it may be, people still, I mean, freedom of speech is there to protect unpopular speech. Popular speech doesn't need protection.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't have to like those people. It's
Yeah,
like Brian Rose says on London Real, I might not agree with you, but I will fight to the death
yeah, he
for
said
your
that
right
to
to
David
say
Icke.
it.
Yeah, he said that to David Icke, and yet he still got taken down. He's like, I'm not endorsing you. I'm just letting a guy state his opinions and perspectives. He never once said be violent or hurt anybody. I mean, what are you taking? You're taking them down for ideas, for perspectives, for I don't even know how people can understand that. And Brian Rose, I give him a lot of credit because he's another guy like Robert Kennedy Jr. who had nothing to do with this whole big pharma fight and kind of like realized, okay, now this is so big that I have to get involved. And so the people like that, and yourself, I mean, like I said in the beginning of the show, I mean, hats go off to you because I'm sure, have you had any negative effects on your career or social media or anything like that, any threats or anything like that since?
Oh God, yes. I've had threats, I've had hatchet pieces, but here's what happened. When I began my Great Awakening series, I lost maybe 2,700 followers on Facebook and a bunch on Instagram and gained 12,700. And
And
I'm shadow banned on Facebook. You go on Facebook and it says there I have 486,000 followers, but then when you look at people who are actually viewing it, it's about 40,000 more than that. So the truth of the matter is it's been nothing but positive.
wow.
And those who have left, I mean, like everybody, if you don't follow their agenda, you're a racist and a white supremacist. That's just day one. But for me, informed consent and medical freedom is my platform, period, end of story. And if we lose that, we've lost everything. So that just remains my platform. And I think, so the people who think that that's, and then, you get the trolls. You're irresponsible, you should lose your license, you should be ashamed of yourself. After a while, the number of anti-vaccine trolls really has gone down dramatically. It's like, I guess they gave up.
But it's amazing what they'll do to a doctor who speaks out. I've had Dr. Scott Jensen on, who's one of the guys who,
Oh, he's amazing. I
yeah,
love him.
and I feel so bad for him because you can tell it really hurts him. Like,
Well, poor, Scott, he's been what we call the ultimate good doctor. And he can't believe this is happening. But if Scott had talked to me 20 years ago, I would have said, Scott, things are not what they seem.
yeah, I think he was like one of those true believers in the system and all
Oh,
that stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think and that's the problem. I mean, I think he's a great person to have on our team because he, like you said, he doesn't care about politics. He doesn't even like being
No.
called a senator. He's like, I'm a physician and whatnot. And he's such a great guy. I mean, you talk to him, it's like he's so sincere. And same thing with Mickey Willis. When I talked to Mickey Willis, I had so many people contact. We ended up talking for 3 hours, believe it or not. But,
Wow.
uh,
Wow.
but he people are like, he is so likable, like, and you sometimes you need those long form conversations because the media and articles demonizing him and saying he was this person who was pseudoscience or it was debunked or Dr. Judy Mikovits was just trying to make money off her book and all this stuff. And then you talk to this guy and you see like, he didn't make one penny off it. He let people post it anywhere he wanted. He really just had his heart was in the right place and he really just cared about making a difference. And that's how I am. All my stuff's open source. I tell people, put it anywhere you want, post it anywhere you want. I don't care. You're not stealing it because I'm telling you, just take it, put it anywhere, because I think the conversation's more important than me having people go to my specific website or YouTube channel or whatnot. So, but I think when you meet people in this world, it's like they're so passionate about what they're doing, and it does make me hopeful. It makes me hopeful that we have a lot of good people on our side. But similar to yourself, this is the topic out of all. I mean, I've done shows on JFK, on all type of historical stuff, World War II stuff, World War I stuff, but this is probably the topic that I'm the most passionate about, because it affects our health, our loved ones, our families. It affects us in such a personal level that I'm like, we'll talk about all that other stuff after we have our bodies back. I mean,
that's right.
All the left that says, hey, like our body, our choice, when they're talking about abortions, how about you use that slogan for vaccines? How about our body, our choice? Like, we're fighting for the same thing. It's just the freedom of like, hey, don't you tell me like what I can put in my body, especially from criminals, when criminals are the ones producing it.
Well, let me tell you, as a former abortion provider, what I say to people, because I've taken a lot of heat, obviously, and I say, look, it's not that hard to have your body reject an unwanted pregnancy. Honest to God, I have a whole section in my book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, where you just say to the soul, this is not going to work this time. And it even happened to my sister. She got pregnant the fourth time, and she just talked to the baby. In fact, she said, look, you really have to go. Baby didn't go. She called up an abortion clinic, and while she's on the phone, she has a miscarriage. And I've heard this kind of story over and over. It's like, I really mean it. Okay, boom, I'll go. But it's easy enough to figure out what to do with that. And you've created that conscious life. It's way harder, if not impossible, to get rid of the toxins from 72 mandated vaccines, with 200 more on the way. I mean, it's like, if you make me choose, I'm going with pro-informed consent and vaccine choice every time. And let me tell you what else, Mrs. Jones or Miss Jones, going to the parties and sleeping with 5 men at a time. I think it's time you ran your pelvis a little more like your bank account. You need to be very careful about who you let in, because this is sacred territory, and let us stop this frickin' hookup culture, shall we? I have a lot to say about that.
Hey, we'll do a whole show on it. I don't stray away from any conversation, so to me, it's all interesting. And these podcasts are a journey for the listener, but also a journey for myself. I get to take in new ideas and perspectives, and kind of mold my own ideas and perspectives in the process. So, I mean, without a doubt, I mean, I know people who were having unprotected sex all the time and now are wearing gloves and masks.
Yes, yes.
I'm like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, which one do you think is more likely to, you're more likely to get a virus with unprotected sex? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you see, like that. Yeah, that doesn't count. We got to be really careful, except for over here. Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. I mean, really, it's just, it's nuts. It shows you the cognitive dissonance, the complete disconnect here. Yeah.
Yeah. All logic has gone out the door. And I think a lot of it became political too. I mean, masks, people kind of just accepted, weren't really doing much. I use this example all the time. If I wore a rag, a bandana, or even one of those face like plexiglass things, shields that people were using, nobody would get mad at me. And so and we know those things don't do anything.
That's right.
So is it about compliance or is it about safety? It's about compliance. They just want to see that you're following the rules and you're going along with the herd and you're not thinking for yourself. That's all it's about. But I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you're a very busy woman. So where can people connect with you? Let them know what your URL for your website, any other place. I know you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook.
Yep, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel, but that's for like my sort of straight medical, this is what you need to do stuff. Dr.Northrup.com is where you can find like the podcasts like yours that I've been on. And then every night I'm on Facebook and Instagram doing a little, I call it, our little call to action for the warriors of the radical light. And that's anybody who is standing up for informed consent, health freedom, but who also understands the power of prayer, the power of their own connection to source energy, to God. So I do that every night. I've been doing it since April 4th. We'll probably continue through the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which is December 21st of this year, when a great solar flash of light is going to come down and hopefully wake up a whole bunch more people.
Yeah, yeah, and I think doing some of that spiritual things are really important to kind of help you self-reflect, analyze what's going on, and you can't promote peace if you don't have peace with yourself. So I think you have to find peace first. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Great conversation. I'll send you links and all that contact information for those people I referred to on the show, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the near future.
Beautiful. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Take care.
Great.